We are recording it. We will send you a link to the recording and a copy of the presentation uh, after the webinar, so usually a few days after. You can find it on our YouTube channel as well. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature. We will take questions at the end of the presentation. And if you are a professional engineer in New Jersey, we are approved to provide PE credits. We will have a form, your attendance form in the chat. So please fill that out and send that to Pri Oliveira. And we will send you a certificate of attendance, again, a couple weeks after the webinar. And so today, two of our speakers had to bow out, but we have John Katz. He has 2 decades of experience helping public and private clients solve complex environmental challenges. He's done a lot of work in Pennsylvania with ecological offsets and water quality solutions. And he's going to talk to us about that experience, how solving the MS4 problems for PennDOT has saved PennDOT a lot of money and also provided a huge benefit to the environment. And I'm going to just sort of set the stage. Why restoration? Why are we talking about that in New Jersey? Why it's necessary, and why I think ultimately this may be the most effective way New Jersey can go about addressing its problems. So if you don't know, in New Jersey, under the Clean Water Act, we have our integrated water quality assessment report every 2 years showing the health of our streams in New Jersey. This is the 2022 report showing that most of the streams that we monitor in New Jersey aren't healthy enough for aquatic life, aren't healthy enough for recreation, primary contact. So that orange means it's not supporting, the green means it is, and the blue is we just don't have enough information. And if I showed you the 2020, the 2018, the 2016, the 2014 charts, it would show a very similar story. Water quality at best is sort of holding, if not degrading a bit. A few years ago, DEP released one of the reports and indicated our highest quality waters were degrading, our worst quality waters were improving. And if you think about that, if you go back to 1970s, when our waters were toxic and flammable, we've done a lot to improve that from, point sources, reducing industrial discharges. But now we're really struggling with our land use. The way we are using our land is having a significant impact on water quality, which has resulted to impairments. If you have impairments, on the right-hand side here is a chart of all the TMDLs, or total maximum daily loads, or pollution budgets for waters that are impaired. How do we get waters back to meeting standards? As you can see, that's a lot of New Jersey. There's not much of New Jersey that isn't impaired and has or has a TMDL. But what does that really mean? So in New Jersey, we're seeing this more and more. We have climate change, we have extreme precipitation where we have heavy rain on a very short period of time, and we have flooding. We have harmful algal blooms. That's the green stream there on the bottom left. That's in the Millstone River. HABs and rivers were not quite common until a couple of years ago. HABs are a combination of pollutants, nutrients reaching our waters and causing these harmful algal to really blossom. We have on the bottom right, this is what a lot of streams in New Jersey look like. You see all those roots, you see sort of that incised bank. That's not what a natural stream should look like in most cases. And in some cases, you will see the bottom of that stream bed being farther in than the top of the bank. So you actually got sort of an inverted V. And that has a lot of repercussions in New Jersey. That means more and more water has to go through that stream before it can jump the banks and hit the floodplain. We have disconnected many of our streams, I'm sorry, many of our streams from its floodplains, which means somewhere else is flooding. Top right is a much more natural looking, much more natural condition of a stream. That water, when it has water in it, and that's I think I took that one during drought a couple of years ago. Has places to go, and not someone's house or streets. And that's a much more natural condition. That's what we should be striving for. And so, we have these conditions and we have some changes at our environmental policies in New Jersey that I think is really moving us towards how do we look at restoring, enhancing our natural conditions. So recently in January, the New Jersey DEP adopted the Resilient Environments and Landscapes Rule, which made some changes to our flood hazard rules, our freshwater wetlands rules, our coastal zone management or CAFRA rules that, again, looking towards mitigation, restoration. So we've changed some things. So now if we have riparian zone impacts, the riparian zone is that area of land between the top of bank outwards. It's not the floodplain, it's our vegetated buffers. For our streams that have 150-foot buffers, if we have 2,000 square feet or more of impacts to that buffer, we're now requiring mitigation. For our 50-foot buffers, and that's a lot of our streams in New Jersey, if you have a tenth of an acre or just over 4,000 square feet of impacts, again, triggering mitigation. And that's a change from the past. Those thresholds have reduced. And we have now mitigation requirements. If we create new riparian zone, there's a 1-for-1. If we're restoring existing riparian zones for every 2 square feet, you have 1. In enhancements, 3-to-1. So again, that's sort of a change from past rules, understanding the benefits riparian zones provide of providing slowing down of floodwaters from our land to our streams and vice versa, the pollution reductions that our riparian zones provide, and just a slowing down in that, it prevents some, slows down the time water takes to go in either direction. We also have changed to our freshwater wetlands rules where if we're redeveloping an area, in years past, we didn't have wetlands regulation, so we built right up to the wetland or into the wetland. Now, if we are redeveloping, pulling back some of that impervious cover, so we start to create more of that transition area or buffer for wetlands. So pull back that impervious cover within 25 feet. And then from the coastal perspective, a much stronger preference for nature-based solutions. Instead of seawalls and hardening, how do we restore nature, enhance nature to protect our communities? So nature-based solutions are now the preferred method for restoration, creation, enhancement of our wetlands, wetland buffers, our estuaries. So these are changes that came in January that will, again, I think, move us more towards restoration and enhancement. But the big one came out in 2013, not 2013, I'm sorry, 2023 with the watershed improvement plans and our new MS4 permit, the Municipal Separate Storm Source System permit that all municipalities have. And understanding in New Jersey that most of our waters are impaired, many of our waters have a TMDL and a requirement from the Clean Water Act, the Federal Clean Water Act, and New Jersey's Water Pollution Control Act, that we have an obligation to restore our waters. DEP took this concept of watershed improvement plan. How do we reduce water quality impairments? How do we meet the requirements of those TMDLs? How do we reduce flooding? And this is something many other states have done. Uh, John and I were talking before this started in the Chesapeake Bay is sort of, at least on the East Coast, a shining example of how do we start to restore impaired waters. They have the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, and the states are obligated to reduce pollution leading into the bay, into all the streams that actually, discharge into the bay. So we've taken that sort of concept that many other states have done for years. We've brought it to New Jersey. We've called them watershed improvement plans, and taken those TMDLs, which we are legally obligated to implement, and now starting to implement them from a stormwater perspective. So the watershed improvement plan has this requirement. It has 3 phases, but the second phase, which all the towns are starting to do right now, what projects are towns going to do to improve that water quality? What are we going to build? What are we going to restore? How are we going to address those impairments? How are we going to address those TMDLs? And we're going to get the money. So, we in New Jersey, in our mind here at the Watershed Institute, we're at a cusp. We can do what we've always done. What can we build from a gray infrastructure? What can we build from a rain garden perspective to meet our needs? And we think that is going to be a huge cost. Or we can look at nature. We can look at restoring nature to address a lot of our needs. And, that incised stream, our sedimentation problems in our stream is in part because of the amount of volume of water our land discharges. The more impervious cover we have in New Jersey, the more volume we're pumping into our streams, which is causing the streams to eat themselves apart. You again see that on the bottom right. And so the goal is, how do we restore? How do we get those streams on the right to look more like the streams on the left? How do we use nature to do that? And, if we think about New Jersey, as I said, we have a lot of impervious cover. A lot of that impervious cover was built before there was any stormwater management rules. And the rules have changed over the years from the 80s all the way to today. But how do you go back and address, 60, 70% of our communities in some areas was built without any stormwater management? So how do you do that in a cost-effective way to meet the needs of reducing flooding, protecting our communities, and improving water quality? So I think this is a huge opportunity for municipalities to understand the restoration, the benefits of wetlands and riparian zones and streams in meeting those needs. The Watershed Improvement Plan report is the second phase, due next year, and it's just finalization of this watershed assessment report. So with that, setting the stage why I think restoration is super important, I'm going to turn it over to John and actually explain what all this means and how the experience of Pennsylvania is, and we can sort of bring that to New Jersey. So John, I appreciate it, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. And you hear me okay, Michael?
Yep.
All right. Give me a second here to share my screen. Okay. Bear with me to get this up and running. All right. I will not move it. Do you see the picture in the first slide?
We've got your presenter. We got your slideshow. You're
Awesome.
good.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for the opportunity to be here, Mike and team. And I am thankful and excited to be here talking about the work that we've done across the river here in Pennsylvania over the past couple of years, and want to identify that this again is just one company's or industry's perspective on this topic of MS4 compliance. Obviously, these are very complex topics when thinking about society wide challenges with water quality and water quantity that every community across the United States, especially those like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, that have been it's developed for 300 years, post European civilization within the United States. So, really happy to be here to introduce some of the successful work that we've done to help really tackle these society-wide challenges that, frankly, we will be having to figure out over the next couple decades. So we'll identify again, some perspectives from our experiences across the region, focus on some case study projects, and give you some pictures of what these cost-effective, publicly procured, nature-based infrastructure solutions look like, as well as talk about some of the creative partnerships that were a part of them. So quick agenda again. I like to start these conversations with the big question of why we're here talking about. And I'm really glad that Mike's intro did start to touch on several of these topics. But why are we talking about TMDL? Green versus gray infrastructure, compliance. Why do we have to be compliant with these state and federal regulations? So setting the stage for kind of why we're here talking about these projects, because it goes back to how we settled the landscape going back the past, 200, 300 years in New Jersey. We'll spend a fair bit of time talking about procurement, ironically, and that may be a little bit of a touchy subject when you're talking about money and millions, and if not trillions of dollars, billions of dollars being spent to try to fix the water quantity, water quality challenges that we face across Jersey and across the country. Then we'll again focus on some case studies from Pennsylvania that we actually learned here in PA based upon case studies from Virginia and Maryland and other states within Chesapeake Bay as MS4 kind of progresses across the United States and touches in different states at different times. And we'll also give an example of a CSO kind of urban environment project. But I did want to call out a big disclaimer at the outset here, as I'm sitting in southeastern Pennsylvania. I live and work out of my home office in Coatesville, which is a small old steel town in western Chester County, probably very similar to many a town in New Jersey, settled in the 1700s and developed through the 1800s, and now is kind of a poor community struggling with things like MS4 compliance. But so a lot of my experience has been in Pennsylvania. A lot of the information I'm sharing today is relative to work that we've done in Pennsylvania, and every state is just unique. You guys have unique regulations, unique regulators. One of the beautiful things about New Jersey is the diversity of ecosystems across the state. Newark is a lot different watershed and community than the Pine Barrens, than the Jersey Shore, than the Central Jersey Highland region. So again, similar to PA, you probably have actually more diversity of watersheds. And that really matters when you're looking at things like MS4, water quality, water quantity compliance. And you guys are going to figure out MS4 compliance in a unique way. And maybe there's the opportunity to simply see and observe what other states and other communities have done and figure out a way that New Jersey can do it honestly better, faster, and cheaper. Some of the case study here in Pennsylvania was even within our company, as a company that works nationally. We did a lot of water quality MS4 work in Virginia in like the early 2000s, up into Maryland through the 2010s as the MS4 compliance realm was evolving and changing. So we as a company really kind of took those lessons learned from other states over the past 5 or 10 years and just tweaked them slightly to really lead to some phenomenal success here in Pennsylvania, and then where it goes in New Jersey, New York, and other states as they start to tackle similar challenges. I think they will be able to do things again better, faster, and cheaper with better outcomes. So again, why are we here again? And I end up in my job speaking to a lot of different kinds of stakeholders, to the public, to children, to obviously customers that are buying stuff from us, but those customers are very diverse. And I try to kind of reset these conversations with kind of maybe a very macro view of kind of why are we here talking about MS4 compliance. But since European settlement of North America, we have really replumbed our watersheds. I think it's hard for us sometimes sitting here in 2026 to understand what the landscape looked like in 1700, 1650, when we first started to settle New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, from post-European settlement. But the landscape looks significantly different, especially within our watersheds. And I'll give a few data points further on here, but just think about that idea of replumbing our watersheds. And we, as we sit here today in modern society, we do face unprecedented challenges with clean air, clean water, with biodiversity. So we're here talking about water, but these challenges we're going to speak to do affect other parts of our modern life existence. And modern society is trying to address those challenges with evolving regulatory programs. We as a company work a lot within the compensatory mitigation space, where we now finally, probably more like 1990s type era regulations, where we now have to replace or offset projects that have unavoidable impacts to wetlands and streams and buffers, as Mike spoke to. Those are all relatively new evolving programs, and they're going to continue to evolve. And then the other evolving regulatory program world is the MS4, TMDL, CSO, and that's really addressing legacy impacts to our watersheds. So again, mitigation is for kind of new impacts. MS4, water quality, TMDL, that's addressing legacy impairments to our watersheds, trying to fix the past 200 years of our land use. So, going back to the origin of European settlement of the United States and New Jersey, I mean, just imagine that we cut down every single freaking tree in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and every other eastern United States country when we first got here, to use that timber, send that timber back to Europe. We use that timber in New Jersey to make bog iron, to create the fuel source, the energy source. And then we tried to turn all of the woodlands and the swamps into farm fields. I like I said I don't like the example here, but I think it's kind of ironic that we as a company work in Ohio, where actually we win millions of dollars of water quality restoration projects to put wetlands back into the area that was drained back in the late 1800s. And there's a sign here that's kind of celebrating the heroic effort that it took to finally drain the Black Swamp, to turn that 1,500 square miles of swamp into productive farmland. Now the state of Ohio is paying companies like us millions of dollars to put the swamp back that had been drained, 100 or so years ago. So, pre-industrial era into really the industrial revolution, where we kind of took that impact on the landscape and we really expedited it into, mechanized commercial agricultural. And we'll talk, I'll kind of pinpoint here in PA that map there, and that heat map of the agricultural development, but really massive impacts on the landscape, draining and channelizing watersheds and within all of our city environments. I mean, people don't really think about, downtown Trenton, Newark, New York City, obviously Philadelphia. There used to be streams and wetlands underneath in those areas. They're now underneath the city environments, and all the streams have been ditched and channelized and levied to keep that water out of our built environment. So what we see is across the entire landscape in our rural environments, that is not what a stream is supposed to look like. Again, Mike shared a few examples of this, but in a relatively undeveloped, an area without a lot of impervious surface coverage, we still have significantly impaired watersheds due to that agricultural settlement. Within our subdivisions, our suburban environments, a lot of heavy stormwater infrastructure, culvert pipes, stormwater retention facilities. We've tried to kind of engineer our way out of avoiding stormwater and flooding challenges within our suburbs. And we do now have, since the post 80s, 90s, NPDES regulations. So we are now managing volumes of stormwater. In some states, in some areas, we're now managing water quality as well as volume within NPDES permits, but still major challenges within our suburban areas where most folks live. Then in our urban environments, if we didn't fill in the wetlands and streams entirely and pave them over, we put all the streams into basically channelized dikes to get that water out of the community as quickly as possible. And all of these areas are really exhibiting major watershed challenges. So I like this picture here. Again, kind of explain how we got here to where we're at today. But the picture on the left-hand side is in 1850, the percentage of the land within agricultural production, and see a very heavy concentration of agricultural land in the southeast part of Pennsylvania, a heavy concentration around the Pittsburgh area in the southwest. And then you fast forward 77 years to 1927, and you're like, well, where the heck did all the farms go? I mean, we didn't put the farms back into woodlands and wetlands. We built American society and the Pennsylvania world and society on top of those agricultural farmlands that had been impaired. So when we first settled the landscape, we turned the woodlands and the wetlands, the Dutch, the German, the Italians, the Welsh, the English, coming from Europe, where they thought a farm looked a certain way. They came to the United States and like, well, let's turn this into the Welsh countryside or the German countryside, because that's what we're used to farming. So really, our streams and our watersheds became the stormwater and the wastewater conveyance off of the farmland. And then we built modern society on top of those artificial landscapes that had been manipulated by agricultural development. And now, as we experience whatever you want to call it, climate change, just changing stormwater dynamics, those watersheds are all starting to unravel. And those eroding stream banks, that impaired watershed, now is the source of the sediment pollution that drives MS4 compliance, at least here in PA. We'll talk more about that later. So again, why are we here today? This stuff is going to cost us a lot of money as society to address. And I just call attention, if nothing else, to that top left news bulletin. That was the United States' biggest water utility company, telling the public that we the people that they are supplying water and wastewater services to, are sitting on a $4 trillion infrastructure time bomb associated with water quantity and water quality. So that's why we're here today, really kind of talking about these kind of challenges. And now that New Jersey is evolving its MS4 program, MS4 is really a way we can start to address some of these systemic challenges that we face. So again, what are we doing about this? We realize that we need to act now, and it's kind of an interesting timing where you guys are at with the development of your MS4 program, where I would be thinking about, from a policy standpoint, really the time to act is now, obviously, but really it's taking action through doing projects. If we spend we collectively, the community, another 5 or 10 years simply putting plans together, it's just a wasted opportunity. You can take some examples from other locations, see what's worked elsewhere. And I would really encourage the state of New Jersey from the MS4 program to really start focusing on implementing projects, getting stuff on the ground as quickly as possible, as opposed to spending the next 5 years or so just simply talking about it and planning what to do. We know enough now as an industry and society that I think we can really jump to implementing and start doing projects. Again, the regulations are all evolving to really address water quality and kind of resource management challenges. The funding is going to come from a variety of locations. What you will start seeing, and are already, I think, seeing in some communities across New Jersey, is impact fees. And for lack of a better term, they're stormwater taxes. Most of our city environments have some sort of stormwater fee that's assessed by the utilities that run those programs. We're seeing that in a lot of suburban municipalities in Pennsylvania, who are now dealing with the cost burden of complying with MS4 program costs through stormwater fees. There's some engineering firms out there that have really kind of done a good job in helping their customers understand the funding required, how to grow a pot of money over the years to tackle multi-million-dollar MS4 projects. But really, focusing on funding is a really big piece of that. And I'm talking about procurement here today in particular. But for those of us that work within the EPC infrastructure business, there's going to be trillions of dollars spent the next few decades addressing these watershed, water quantity, water quality challenges. It's job security, I suppose, for those of us that work in that space. But again, that does create a lot of economic opportunity across the supply chain. Engineers, scientists, attorneys, laborers, contractors. A lot of the work that's going to have to be done here is work that really can't be done by AI or whiz bang applications. It's really hard work on the ground fixing stuff is what's going to be coming out. And then really, again, talking about this here a lot today is innovative procurement, larger scale projects, and really a nature-based focus for these projects to help address multiple issues within every dollar spent. If that dollar spent can address MS4 compliance, flood resiliency, biodiversity, it makes you stretch those dollars a lot further out. So talking about procurement, and this might seem to be a bit of a dry topic, but for many of you in the room here today, you probably do have some familiarity with how we procure, how we buy stuff. How, if you're building a project, how do you get from, hey, I've got the money, I need to do something, to actually getting the project built on the ground? Most projects that are procured through traditional procurement, which is design, bid, build. So you hire company A to put a plan together. You might hire company B to put the more detailed engineering permit drawings together. You hire company C to go build the project. You hire company D, E, F, G, H, I through the life of the project to maintain, to monitor, to fix. So that's what we refer to as traditional procurement, design, bid, build. That is, quite frankly, how a lot of projects do need to get done, I suppose. However, it is a relatively intense administrative effort, and that more administrative effort, more cooks in the kitchen, more vendors involved, is higher cost and less accountability. So you probably have some familiarity with design, build, or EPC procurement, which is a step beyond that, where you have a one entity responsible for designing the project and building the project. They're typically not involved in siting or acquiring the land, and they may not be involved in maintaining or stewarding or operating the project, but you at least get through that design and construction phase with one point of contact, which can accelerate and expedite getting projects built. What we're talking about here today is really the next level progressive procurement, which is we call either full delivery or turnkey, or the way PennDOT procured it was design, build, operate, maintain. But you may also hear terms like pay for performance or performance-based contracting. And what that is, that's really what we're really focusing on here today, is a single point of contact to develop the entire life cycle of the project, find the location, design, permit, build, maintain, and operate that project to deliver some sort of credit or a product. And that's what you get paid for: fixed, upfront, unit-based pricing, with the responsibility on the vendor, the company, to guarantee the perpetual performance of that project, especially when tied to things like regulatory compliance, pounds of sediment reduction from S4, and whatever commodity New Jersey ends up latching onto. But full delivery, again, is the delivery of that unit of measurement of environmental and regulatory compliance for fixed cost. And this is a relatively disruptive procurement approach to established business communities. The engineering firms, the construction companies, the designers, the planners. This procurement approach, full delivery, can be a little bit disruptive. I've experienced that as a company operating exclusively within this full delivery space. We're kind of changing the paradigm of how customers are buying stuff, and change is hard. And I do understand that. I get that feedback and that pushback oftentimes. But the reality is that we're facing new challenges with limited funding, and we need to start doing stuff differently in order to get to the outcomes that we're trying to get to. So, why does procurement matter? I just want to give 3 quick examples here, And again, reminder: change is hard. I get it. But the top one is a compensatory mitigation project in North Texas that our company was involved in. This was the country's largest mitigation project ever completed. 17,000 acres of wetlands, streams, buffers, upland habitats, endangered species habitats. That entity, the water utility, kind of midway through the design of a 20-year-long project, pivoted to a full delivery approach to implement the mitigation for that project. And this is their quote: that by simply switching delivery method from design, bid, build with multiple vendors involved to this full delivery approach where one company is responsible for implementing the full 20-year life cycle of the project, they realized about $100 million in contract savings. That's a material amount of money for a utility to put that money back into their infrastructure assets. Another example from Virginia, again, this was kind of the cradle of the full delivery MS4 water quality market in the country, quite frankly. But their Virginia DOT, kind of in the early stages of changing regulations, back to 2009, 10, 11 or so, was looking at their NPDES water quality compliance of doing their traditional design bid build approach with their engineering firms, their contractors for new kinds of water quality improvements along new highway construction. So they assess the model of doing business the old way: design, bid, build, multiple vendors, versus water quality trading, buying the credit, and they expected a 5 to 75% cost savings, averaging around 51%. To meet their NPDES permit compliance using a new procurement approach. And what's interesting is the VDOT's commitment to water quality trading, a new way of doing it, spurred a ton of environmental and economic development within our space, to where now all the other developers, the housing developers, the shopping center developers, followed VDOT's model, because VDOT kind of built the market out because of their kind of the amount of needs they had within this piece of their regulatory compliance program. And again, we'll be focusing here today mostly on Pennsylvania with PennDOT's MS4 program, using that design, build, operate, maintain procurement. They initially thought that MS4 compliance would cost them $50 million over that 5-year period. Since going through the past 3 to 4 years of this innovative approach with full delivery, DBOM procurement, they are more than compliant for their DEP and EPA regulations for about $10 million, saving this guy over here as a funder of PennDOT over $40 million in their compliance cost by honestly just simply changing procurement. And that's part of the fantastic story here. So again, the visually depicting what full delivery looks like, as opposed to having, I like this pictograph here, incremental contracting, handoff from A to B to C to D, all of the procurement steps you go through with RFPs, bidding, contracting, versus having one entity going from A to Z through the project life cycle. It's just simply faster implementation and lower cost. It is one of those unique opportunities to get what you need better, faster, and cheaper. And there's not too many areas in life where that can be done, but there's some case studies here within this MS4 space. So that full delivery approach is one that our company really, we exclusively work in. We're not a consulting firm. We're not a contractor. We're a developer of these offset type projects. But we really cut our teeth, and the industry cuts teeth within the compensatory mitigation space, working from left to right. If you're New Jersey DOT, New Jersey Transit, we've done some work for. Those folks are typically accustomed to the idea of buying a mitigation bank credit to offset unavoidable impacts to wetlands and streams. So that's where the full delivery market really was established, going back into the 90s in different parts of the country. We use this approach in environmental lawsuits, NERDA type issues, where there's some sort of legacy compliance that needs acres of wetland restoration or some other water quality metric tied to a lawsuit. Obviously, we're here today talking about water quality and stormwater offsets, a huge growing full delivery market across the United States. Again, every single community across the United States is struggling with water quantity or water quality, and it's showing up in TMDLs, CSOs, MS4s, consent decrees if they're not compliant. So that's a humongous growth area within the full delivery market. And then we're even seeing opportunities for full delivery implementation of nature-based solutions within corporate sustainability, voluntary type markets. We as a company, I know data centers are a very sensitive subject, maybe less so in New Jersey than they are right now in Pennsylvania or Northern Virginia or Ohio, some other kind of data center, really hotbeds across the United States. But we as a company are working with Meta, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all of the big tech companies that have made water stewardship commitments to the communities where they're building data centers, where they are committing to implement multi-million-dollar projects that provide volumetric water benefit to those communities. So, going from left to right here, we sell a wetland widget to a DOT for a highway project. We sell and we develop a stormwater widget for an MS4 customer. And then with this sustainability realm, we're selling a volumetric water benefit widget to someone like Google, Microsoft, and implementing nature-based infrastructure within those communities. So, quick overview of MS4 programs. Regulatory framework is really focused on watershed impairments across the landscape. Always typically tied to stormwater pollution. 5-year permit cycles. Usually the cycles have a sequence to them where early cycles are mapping, planning, and then you get to cycle number 2 or 3 where you start implementing. But ultimately you get to a pollution reduction plan, which says our pollution load is this. We have to reduce that by 5 or 10% within the next 5-year permit cycle. What is your plan to do so? Within those instructions, there's BMP checklist, and as Mike referenced, rain gardens, bioswales, stormwater basin retrofits, but then a lot of those include more nature-based BMPs, wetland restoration, riparian buffers, stream restoration. But there is usually some underlying methodology or protocol for those different BMPs that score the project, that gets to how many pounds or units of MS4 compliance measurement that BMP is going to generate and develop. Why stream restoration? And actually, we're going to use the term stream restoration here, but it's actually more floodplain restoration. But the way we generate MS4 compliance is twofold within PA. Is number one is we're removing that eroding stream bank to where it's now not contributing sediment during rain events. And then we're also reestablishing floodplain wetlands to capture additional sediment and stormwater coming into it from upstream. So there's kind of 2 ways that we're reducing the sediment pollution. So if you're PennDOT, why stream restoration? So this cost comparison actually came from a consulting firm that did a lot of planning work as well as design work for their municipal customers. But I want to call attention to different kinds of BMPs. And what you're going to see is that the amount of pounds of reduction those projects have on that kind of top half of the list, which is kind of traditional gray infrastructure upgrades and retrofits, very low number of pounds, a very high representative project cost, leading to an exceptionally high unit cost. And if you're PennDOT and you need literally 2 or 3 million pounds of sediment reduction, do you want to pay for $106 pounds or do you want $2 pounds? And what evolved here is that obviously PennDOT wanted the low cost dollar pounds to save the $40 million we spoke to earlier. So quick technical-ish assessment of MS4 here in PA. Again, the DEP in PA had determined that really eroding stream banks are the source of the sediment pollution. Now that we have NPDES permits, so our site development activities typically are managing stormwater better now. However, our streams are so impaired, our watersheds are so impaired that stormwater hits our streams, and then that's the source of the sediment pollution. So there's BHI and Banks data sheets where we are measuring and quantifying the sediment pollution coming off of impaired streams. The next one is the Banks methodology, which again is measuring shear stress, during high bank full flow events. And again, site selection is really critical. We're doing a fair bit of engineering and technical details at the specific BMP location to determine how much pollution is occurring now under the current conditions. And then when we restore it, how much sediment pollution reductions do we expect to achieve within this restoration project BMP footprint? That leads to kind of a heat map, so to speak, of the worst erosion areas within that restoration project footprint. All of that's part of the site selection and the design process that goes into these BMPs. So again, all wrapped up under the MS4 permit compliance requirements that our customers have. I'm checking the time here. I'll try to move through these examples pretty quickly. So PennDOT did not just jump into wholesale multi-million-dollar procurement contracts. What they did is, after talking to their colleagues in Virginia and Maryland, they put out a pilot project where they said, we've got $750,000 to spend on this pilot project. Public RFP. They said, folks like Res, find a project site and tell us exactly how many pounds of sediment reduction you're going to deliver to us for $750,000. That leads to a unit cost, right? Dollars divided by pounds equals dollars per pound. The bids range from under $5 a pound to almost $30 a pound. The two other bids were in the middle, kind of like $10 or $16 per pound. Looking back on it, we left some money on the table. It would have been nice to have bid like $8 or $9 a pound and still won, but this was really a proof of concept opportunity for us. So acquired private land to build this project. They shared the sediment reduction credit with the York County Planning Commission. And what I really like to kind of call attention to is the contract was issued in late 2018. The project was designed, permitted, and constructed in under 12 months. When you have the right entity, the right procurement approach, the funding available, these projects should not take all that long to get through design, permitting, and construction if you have the procurement and the right kind of market-based conditions. So pre-restoration, again, typical impaired stream channel, that's the source of sediment pollution right there on the left-hand side in particular. So pre-construction, post-construction, the banks that were 3, 4, 5 foot tall in length are now 2 inches in height, and they are vegetated. So December 2019, a few months later, April, I took most of these pictures myself. I love going out to these project sites every time. It's really fun to see how they evolve. So 2020 came back a year later. The wetlands are thriving. I was actually at this site last week doing a kind of a dog and pony show with a local land trust. Actually, Pennsylvania's kind of statewide land trust organization, introducing what MS4 projects look like. The sycamore tree there in the picture on the left, that tree is now probably about 20 foot in height. Black willows are popping up. It looks like a very beautiful, thick shrub wetland complex now. I need to update my pictures here. This is a couple years old. So at the very bottom end of the site, looking upstream into that restored floodplain wetland valley, and then turning around and looking downstream at the impaired conditions, we've actually has since come back and restored the section here on the right-hand side through another funding approach that was not for MS4. So we try to build out big-scale projects as we get funding available through different funding sources. But second example was the first time that PennDOT did the same procurement approach, but engaged in a municipal partnership where PennDOT put in $1 million, and then 3 municipalities that were already partnering in a watershed scale approach, they all put in $1 million. Then PennDOT procured a $2 million solution within the Paxton Creek watershed. Once again, a range of bids that were assessed at the lowest dollar per pound. Res was fortunate enough to develop the most cost-effective proposal, and we won the contract with a pretty significant range there still in what the bids were within the vendor pool that was interested in doing this work. Once again, all 3 projects designed, permitted, and constructed in under 12 months, which is pretty cool, getting stuff in the ground. 3 different BMPs were included within this contract. Interestingly, one was a township park, one was a private property with an HOA, and then one project, which is depicted here, Vets Park, we called it, was a 4,000 linear foot stream, probably 5-acre floodplain wetland restoration project that actually rode between the township park property and state-owned land. The PA Fish and Boat Commission, their office is on the right-hand side there. That's their parking lot. It was kind of interesting having the PA Fish and Boat Commission like literally looking down over the project during construction, and they've become a really big proponent of this restoration approach because they've seen the benefits like literally firsthand on their property underneath their noses. So they've been really a good collaborator of ours over the years. But really a great partnership story here where PennDOT was the procurement lead using design, build, operate, maintain procurement that municipalities sometimes are not able to utilize. And PennDOT facilitated the contracting, leading to great outcomes. So, what this site looked like, again, really a hot mess of a watershed pre-restoration. I guarantee you folks on the call here know streams that look just like this within their local parks. This is pre-restoration. I like this one. This was our project manager, Eric, is a dear friend. Actually during construction, December, he's about 5'10", probably. Those eroding banks there are probably 6+ foot in height. Obviously, we've got mature trees that are in the process of being eroded and falling down. And then this was about 2 years later, 2 growing seasons post restoration. Same guy, same stream, same valley. Now within 100-foot wide, beautiful wetland complex. The willows and trees are already taller than he is. So really, pretty fantastic nature-based, outcomes here. Beautiful wetland, diverse wetland systems. This is about, I include a picture on the left here. We don't build ponds in our wetlands. We have vernal features, but we're not building kind of traditional wetland mitigation projects that people may have seen over the years where you're kind of building just big basins. This is about the extent of any open water that we'll have within these restored floodplain wetland systems. Most of it is a pretty dense, diverse, lush, PEM, PSS, then developing into a forested wetland complex over the years. Another example from Chester County within Chesapeake Bay. This was our 4th contract with PennDOT, all publicly procured. Again, similar story here, pre-restoration on the left-hand side. I like including this picture in part because that gentleman, Billy, actually lives in New Jersey now. He moved from Pittsburgh to New Jersey, and he's about 6'2", so those are about 6-foot tall banks there. We oftentimes get a little bit of pushback from folks when we're cutting down trees to restore floodplain wetlands. When we do cut down a lot of trees, that's a very similar spot on that project site, pre-restoration versus post-restoration. Those trees were cut down. Interestingly, a small tornado came through this project site, and the tornado actually blew down most of those trees, which made the conundrum of telling folks we were cutting trees down to do ecosystem restoration a little more palatable when nature blew those trees down because they were on a perched artificial floodplain as depicted here on the left-hand side. So pre-restoration, post-restoration, I like these next pictures. We're talking about nature-based results. So this project was funded at the lowest dollar per pound of sediment pollution reduction. But through nature-based infrastructure projects, we get today's biomass. And I love the sound of high-quality ecosystem restoration, especially in the spring. It is almost deafening when the spring peepers and the bullfrogs and the green frogs and the other frog species, I'm not a herpetologist, but when they're really in new habitats, acres and acres in size, the amount of biomass that's produced within those restored ecosystems is pretty dang cool. And you get today's biomass, and then you get tomorrow's biomass on the right-hand side. These are relatively impactful restoration projects. And we do get a little pushback sometimes where some folks are concerned that the restoration practice itself is too destructive on the landscape. I mean, we are rebuilding floodplains here. These are big-ass construction projects, multi-million-dollar construction projects, huge amounts of dirt and earth being moved. This was 1 year post-restoration. That stream had mayflies, caddisflies, and I think we'll eventually have stoneflies. So if you're a fly fisherman, you know your EPT taxa, your what you're using to catch those fish. So 1 year post restoration, we got good bugs in the stream. And then on the right hand side, that's my hand. I used to be a biologist doing stream assessments and things like this. Those are dragonflies and damselflies. Those are predators. So it's a pretty good thing in the ecosystem when you have predators showing up, because that means you have prey species. So the entire ecosystem is coming back to health through these restorative practices that are, again, being funded by MS4 sediment pollution goals. So I want to give one little urban kind of case study project where this procurement approach really was so impactful, because I know New Jersey's got a lot of very highly developed areas. They're dealing with CSO and other more difficult stormwater challenges. But this example is from Philadelphia, where PWD had a kind of Green City, Clean Waters, Green Acre retrofit program. A greened acre is 1 or 1.5 inches of runoff off 1 acre of impervious cover. But the special story here is that the procurement approach facilitated full delivery implementation. You tell us what the project will deliver, and we'll pay you at the dollar per widget that you tell us it's going to cost, and doing a larger scale project. So the utility managing one project with 67 greened acres versus managing 67 projects with 1 greened acre, the administrative cost savings, and to deliver a $13 million infrastructure project. That is Lincoln Financial Field. The Eagles are playing, not right now, but they're playing in the stadium behind there. We actually took down a warehouse building and put underground stormwater retention and put a parking lot on top of that. So if you have tailgated at a Phillies or Eagles game, you may have tailgated on top of PWD and Philadelphia's largest green acre retrofit program that was procured through a full delivery approach. So kind of run through the last probably third of the slide deck here. But when we think about MS4 compliance and BMPs, again, what are you paying for? Are you paying for design services, or are you paying for the implementation of a project to reduce the sediment pollution, the MS4 unit of concern? Public land, private land, we as a company, we don't really care. We're looking for the most cost-effective project. That might be on public land. It might be on private land. We're looking for cost-effective, resilient projects. Again, what's the duration of the contract? Our contracts, our projects are essentially forever projects. So we build that into our site selection when we're on the hook for the long-term success of these projects. What's the long-term protections, easements, maintenance agreements? How and when are you paying for the projects? Most of our work is done through payment milestones, where we don't get paid until we've gotten to the next milestone in the implementation of the project. Some of our projects, we don't get paid a dime until we actually have built the project and get to year 1 post-construction. We do a lot of work, with Penvest through a different procurement approach, where we'll win, for example, $3 or $4 or $5 million in funding for a floodplain restoration project. We don't get paid a single penny until we design, permit, build, and then get to year 1 post-construction, and we validate that those pounds of nitrogen reduction have been achieved at that nature-based BMP. Financial assurances, again, long-term maintenance. So these are all kind of terms that show up in procurement for these kind of projects. So developing cost-effective projects, site selection is just so critical. We are oftentimes paying landowners to allow us access to the property to do these projects, which can be more cost-effective than getting free public land. Really knowing the life cycle of the project. With the projects that we're showcasing here, there's kind of an ideal size watershed project that really is the right fit, where it's at a certain spot in the watershed where we can control our destiny. We really can't afford to do these projects on the main stem of a humongous river where there's so much impervious cover upstream that it might totally blow out our project 4 or 5 years later. So kind of really dialing in the right sites, really critical. Having the right team that understands the life cycle of the project to help avoid those situations where your engineer said, well, here, it's not, and I know there's a lot more to it than this, but we build this project, it's going to generate this amount of water quality outcome. It gets handed off to a contractor. They're scratching their head. They've never built a wetland or a stream, and you get this, this kind of battle between the designer, the contractor. Then someone comes in later to do the maintaining of the landscape, and they don't know what was done before them. So having all of those folks at the table when you're finding the right site, developing the site, and bidding on what the project's going to cost is really critical. And then really knowing the evolving regulations. I don't know if we have regulators on the call here today, but the regulations, the methodology, the scoring criteria can have such an impact on the overall success of the project and the program. And really, as an implementer, as a vendor doing this work, we have to have a incredibly focused attention on the methodology and the regulations, because we're guaranteeing delivery on these projects that are held to those standards. So really having that regulatory expertise is incredibly important. So creative partnership ideas. I do want to kind of give some hope on how to do these things better, faster, and cheaper. But DOTs are the state's largest permittees. They tend to have limited right of way and land to do projects on. So I would love to see there be collaboration with New Jersey DOT, New Jersey Transit. We know those folks. Happy to help connect some dots there if we can. But they tend to be a great partner on a watershed, larger scale approach. They may be able to help with procurement as well. We really encourage municipalities to partner together. Again, this can be one of the challenges where you might have competing interest with two municipalities. Like, well, who's going to get the project cited within their municipalities? We really encourage folks to look at these issues from a watershed scale standpoint and encourage collaboration amongst permittees in order to stretch your dollars further. But there's all kinds of other folks that you might be able to partner with: developers, solar, the data center, the warehouse developers, a big thing in New Jersey. But what if the warehouse developer was part of helping you fund and implement an MS4 BMP that your municipality and your constituents didn't need to pay for? So partnerships abound. I mentioned some of those voluntary programs that the tech companies are funding. Johnson and Johnson, the big energy companies, your utility companies, a lot of large organizations have some sort of water focused initiative and stewardship goals that can be a really good funding partner for MS4 compliance projects within your municipalities. So we're getting to the end here, I believe. So my kind of top takeaways, if I was trying to communicate the most important things to a state that is on the cusp of figuring out what you're going to do holistically with addressing MS4 compliance, but procurement. Progressive procurement can save 10 to 30% over that traditional design bid build approach, and just think of the outcomes, that the benefit on the landscape. If you're stretching your dollars 10 to 30% further, how much more work you can get done by just simply changing your procurement approach. Partnerships and collaboration matter so much. Again, you're sharing your funding pools. You're helping find the most cost-effective projects. You're doing larger scale projects, and within the nature-based infrastructure world, larger scale equals lower cost. It is just it's a no-brainer that you can do. If you do larger scale projects, your unit cost buckles down incrementally with the larger scale that you go. And then really from our firm's perspective, really a focus on nature-based projects. We spoke here today a lot about floodplain wetland restoration, and that's kind of a newer, more novel restoration approach within the stream restoration space that we as a company have done a lot of in Pennsylvania, a few other spots around the country. But and why we focus on nature-based projects is gray infrastructure has a lifespan. That pipe might only last in the field for 10, 15, 20, 30 years before it will need to be replaced. Whereas with green infrastructure, nature-based infrastructure, if you site it well, design it well, and build it well, you only build it one time and it's functioning forever the way nature was intended. And then you get a ton of essentially free co-benefits. I love encouraging folks that, again, MS4 folks are buying the lowest dollar pound per sediment pollution reduction, but they're getting free flood resiliency. That's pretty impactful. They're getting free biodiversity improvements. They're getting free environmental justice when we cite projects in environmental justice impacted communities, which we try to do, which is pretty cool. Bringing that investment back into communities like the one that I live in that have been impacted by environmental justice challenges over the years, the educational opportunities. There's so many opportunities to pull in academia, high school kids, middle school kids, elementary school kids into nature-based projects and teaching our youth about these really critical issues. So last couple slides. One example. This is kind of my pet project that I think will be funded by MS4 compliance. But that cow, pardon my terminology here, is shitting in the stream directly above my freshwater drinking reservoir, and that's kind of not cool. So we have been working on this project for 3 or 4 years now to work on funding. And what I believe is that we will make some progress with my water utility company. I will not name their name, but they are one that is, I think, headquartered in New Jersey and a big player in the New Jersey space. But I do believe we're going to get all parties to the table where we will be obviously kicking that cow out of the stream and restoring that into a floodplain wetland system directly upstream from the public water reservoir, keeping the dirt, the nutrients, the sediment out of the reservoir. And again, my idea of pitching this to the utility for funding is they can spend $3 or $4 million keeping the dirt out of the reservoir, or they'll spend $10 or $20 million hydraulically vacuuming the dirt out of the reservoir once it gets in there and gets lodged in. So it's really a much more cost-effective approach. And ironically, MS4 funding and MS4 design criteria is going to be part of why this thing comes to fruition. This is also part of me just putting this out into the ether. And the more I talk about it, the more likely that I think it's going to get funded, because I've been working on this thing for like 3 or 4 years now. Because again, it really does hit close to home when I'm paying a $400 a month water bill, and I've got that dynamic taking place within the watershed my water's coming from. So again, closing out with, why are we here again? This is why we're here, folks. This stuff we're talking about is really impactful from a financial standpoint. And if we don't take the steps now, our kids are going to be paying for that. That's my dear family. A couple of years ago, the little guy next to me is now 6'2". That water wasn't too bad, I guess. It's helped him grow. But this is really a topic that I'm really passionate about. Enjoy sharing this information on. Because it is really a existential issue we face with water quantity and water quality and paying for it. And that's why it warrants so much attention. So I think I am done here. I will leave this screen up perhaps and have some time here for Q&A.
Right. Well, a lot of great information.
I'm going to stop sharing now so I can see this here.
Yeah, so, John, couple things you pointed out. I just want to sort of talk a little bit about, and again, put your questions in your Q&A. I know we have one there now, but please put them in. So in the res model, this nature-based, you can take public property and restore it. You can obtain easements on private property to do these nature-based solutions. You can take fee of private property. So you can own the property outright, or you can have a easement or a license to go onto the property to do the restoration. So that actually opens up a lot of possibilities to do things. Did I understand that right?
Yep,
yeah,
that's correct.
So,
So you have to have to do a MS4 project. You have to have a location to do said project, right? I often got to make the joke that within our business, we need 3 things. We need a funder. Someone's got to pay us to do the work. We need a permit or a methodology to score the project. So you need a regulatory review, and you need land. You need a location to do a project. And you are correct, Mike, that even the scope of those case study projects, that included private property, part of that MS4 contract of $1.95 a pound for PennDOT, where they bought 1 million pounds in Chesapeake Bay. Some of that contract value went to us paying it's not Amos, uh, the Blank family. I forget Elmer Blank, an Amish farmer. We paid him. I'm not sure that it was X dollars per acre of land to allow us to place a piece of his farm under a conservation easement because private landowners are giving up something when they enroll one of their projects with us for these kind of restoration projects. So we are, if it's private land, we are always compensating the landowner to allow us access forever to that piece of the property to protect that project forever. If it's public land, sometimes we're doing some additional kind of co-benefits. We'll build a new parking lot, kind of some services in lieu of paying a public landowner for access to the property. But there's always a need for a perpetual access and the ability to maintain and monitor the property forever, as well as protect the integrity of the project.
So the easements and the on private property, I think that opens up some exciting options. We have, New Jersey has a lot of municipalities have an open space tax to use for open space purchases. We have the Green Acres program to purchase and, steward property, and Green Acres allows, for watershed protection, ecological restoration. So that may open up some pots of money to do these projects, which aren't going to be cheap here in New Jersey. Land is at a premium cost. But you had mentioned all the other co-benefits, the ecological benefits, the habitat, and the biomass creation. So that may, in fact, open up a lot of options than if we built things in a traditional stormwater perspective. And you mentioned the stormwater utility. You called it a tax. I didn't stop you, but it's truly a fee because non-property tax paying entities would be paying the stormwater utility fee. We have 4 of those in New Jersey right now. I know some other municipalities are looking at it, and it's, just to give background, and you may have mentioned this, stormwater utilities have been around since 1970s. I forget whether it was 72 or 78. And there's over like 2,000 of them throughout the country. So not a newfangled thing, something that exists, and I suspect we'll have more of those in New Jersey as we start to do these things. Trying to think, and you also mentioned the macroinvertebrates. And so if I understood this correctly, and I am not a biologist, those bugs you were talking about were going from sort of the more pollutant tolerant bugs, which then makes the waters impaired under the integrated report, to the more healthy, less pollutant tolerant bugs, the ones we want to see more and more of.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
What's interesting in some of our projects, and again, we as a company, a lot of our work is funded through mitigation banking, where we're developing wetland and stream credits through floodplain restoration. So again, the projects oftentimes look pretty similar on the landscape, just different kind of widget, different funding program. Within our mitigation bank projects, one of our success criteria we have to document post-construction is increases in macro and fish biomass, increases in macroinvertebrate population, biodiversity, as well as a decrease in their pollution tolerances or an increase in their pollution tolerances, better bug communities 2, 3, 4, 5 years post restoration. We don't have to do those assessments in MS4 projects. We end up doing it anyway because our biologists love kicking rocks and seeing what critters are there. But the idea is that through nature-based projects, we are having that holistic benefit to the ecosystem that shows up in better bug populations. And one thing people oftentimes ask is like, well, you're making wetlands, you're going to have an increase in mosquitoes and black flies. That's why I wanted to show the picture of those predators. When you fix nature, you end up building the entire ecosystem back to where it takes care of itself. So you might hear the dragonflies, you might hear the spring peepers going off, but you're not getting the an increase in mosquitoes and the other nasty stuff because you have the other critters there who are eating the mosquitoes. You've reestablished the balance within the ecosystem that didn't exist within the impaired landscape.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm going to go to a couple of the questions on here. So how would you suggest municipalities organize to fund these approaches when problems are strewn across the various HUC levels and municipal boundaries? Would you say a specific TMDL that each town funds management of and fund it to different funding banks for each TMDL, or would each town fund their own compliance portions of their problems?
That's a very good question, and it leads to that collaboration idea. So what I've seen help folks advance projects faster and implement projects faster and cheaper is collaboration across larger areas, whether that's a watershed approach or a county approach, as opposed to each township tackling it themselves. So that's there's a few examples in Pennsylvania where I've seen that watershed or that county-wide approach work, where each municipality is kind of scoring themselves with their contribution of impervious surface within that watershed or that larger area. So they're each accountable for their particular quantity of stormwater or pollution within the larger area. And that allocation of their pollution determines their financial contribution to a larger scale project. So it can be hard to herd the cats, quite frankly, to get a lot of folks together to agree to do something. But we've seen where folks put in the 1 or 2 years of effort to build the coalition to band together. And again, you may not get a project in every single municipality, but each municipality, by partnering, can tie into a larger, cheaper project and reduce their cost for compliance.
Yep, exactly. And, I will do a shameless self plug here. The Watershed Institute has been organizing municipalities to do these regional watershed improvement plans. And so we have 4 of 6 towns in the Stony Brook watershed, five, I wish I remember the numbers, 5 or 6 of 10 to 11 towns in the lower Millstone, something very similar with the upper Millstone and with the Assunpink watersheds coming together, allocating that sort of impairments. And, for the Stony Brook, for example, I think is an 83% reduction in the Stony Brook from a TSS perspective. How do you allocate that town-wise? So looking at that as the whole watershed and developing the projects. And then at our watershed conference a few years ago, DEP had said towns under this process could contribute to projects upstream to, as part of their plan. They need to have that sort of commitment. So I could do wetlands restoration or riparian zone restoration upstream, make sure that there's a commitment to do that, and I get those benefits in my watershed improvement plan. So we can target, because you also mentioned putting projects in the wrong place if you don't control the volume may just be putting a Band-Aid that gets ripped off later on. So really targeting some of the real sources of the problem is going to be important.
Yep. And when you do band together and you look at a larger area, it gives you a larger area to assess to find the most cost effective projects. We've had several situations where we talked to a township and they've looked at every single foot of stream restoration within their municipal boundary within the urbanized, because there's all these mapping layers that show up within the MS4 space, the urbanized area, the HUC 8, the HUC 12 watershed. But the more the larger area you have to assess helps you find the most cost effective and resilient projects. So the larger area you had to work in. So the way PennDOT, the way their MS4 permit was developed was they could implement projects anywhere within the Chesapeake Bay to address their Chesapeake Bay pollutant contributions all the way up to the New York state border, down to the Maryland state border. They had a very large, obviously humongous watershed where they could kind of cherry pick where they would put projects. And they chose the most cost effective locations to implement projects. What that meant was that Chesapeake Bay example, we implemented that project in that location because it was a direct contribution to the Chesapeake Bay. So every pound of sediment reduced there had the highest likelihood of being kept out of the bay compared to other watersheds that had to go through a series of other rivers and over dams to get to the bay itself. So that siting criteria is really critical, and having as large an area to look will help you find the most cost-effective projects.
Yeah. So the next question. So, in New Jersey, our watershed improvement plan, so the planning perspective is, we sort and not quite, but we come up with the draft plan this year. We finalize the draft plan next year. But the question is keeping in line with your suggestion to begin implementing projects rather than be held up in conversation and schematics. How do you propose that municipalities begin? Is there a logical place to start with instances, locations, for reported stream scouring? I'm going to toss that one to you. I mean, I'm going to develop a few thoughts of my own, but
Yeah, and you probably we're a private commercial company that's again a bit disruptive to the business community, the traditional engineering construction community, and we have to acknowledge that. So I am serious that it does. I say it pains me a little bit when I do see the level of effort that goes into voluminous planning documents that, quite frankly, get put on a shelf somewhere and no one implements because there's lack of funding. So the idea is, can we get to implementing projects as quickly as possible? I don't think you're that far off. I think you guys have some established standards and expectations with the DEP on how you reduce the TSS and the pollutants of the MS4 program. Most of the towns and municipalities probably know what their pollution reduction loading needs to be. Maybe not. Yep. Okay.
I'm not so sure about that,
Okay.
but
Maybe earlier you are
they're
earlier in
working
that
on it.
still working on that. So, but once you identify what your pollutant of concern is and what your target is, you're needing to reduce that pollutant. Put that information out there to the folks like us and say, help us go find projects that meet these regulatory parameters and get us the regulatory compliance goals that we're looking for. That I mentioned that pilot project. PennDOT didn't jump into just throwing out millions of dollars to folks. They kind of stepped through that with a pilot project
Mhm.
to kind of test the market to see how folks like us would respond. And we are not the only player in this space. There's a lot of great companies in New Jersey that have developed banks that are doing great restoration projects. We work with them, we partner with them, so that the industry exists, and I think you're not that far away. Once you get the commodity, how you're measuring MS4 success, and then once you know what your target is, you can put the word out there to folks like us, and we'll go find the project for you.
Yeah. And I'm going to go out on a limb. If there is an opportunity that develops, as we're going through this planning process and, developing the idea of the projects, if an opportunity presents itself, I would suggest we jump on it. We start that process. That would certainly, in my mind, count as a credit to what you are going to do, because the development of these plans are looking at historic water quality data. So anything you do tomorrow is addressing that historic stuff.
Yep.
I will also, not quite on this topic, but say, New Jersey is going through a ton of redevelopment, and New Jersey is going to be more and more redevelopment. Our developable land is shrinking because have developed it. So taking opportunities to make sure that new development goes in is better and performs better than what it is replacing will be a huge opportunity. So enhanced stream corridor ordinances, enhanced stormwater management ordinances help reduce those problems.
Yeah,
And then,
like quick add on to that point, because again, folks are already spending time and energy doing ecosystem projects in New Jersey. I mean, I read, a couple, a year or two ago in the Philadelphia Inquirer about like a grassland bird meadow restoration project that a land trust was implementing. Local park projects that are naturifying, kind of ecosystem restoration projects. Most of those projects can generate some sort of MS4 credit. And we oftentimes are encouraging municipalities that are doing some work within that space to make sure they're documenting that, because
Mhm.
if you're already doing a natural meadow restoration project to reduce your mowing cost in the township park, if you can squeeze out 10, 20, 100 pounds of sediment pollution reduction by means of that otherwise kind of just a green kind of restoration project, all of those things can add up, and starting today or tomorrow. So,
Yep. All right, last question. How is the value of different credits, steam credits, sediment credits created?
yep. So what is the regulatory obligation that we're achieving? Is it
Mhm.
Section 404 compliance for wetland stream mitigation? Is it TMDL MS4 compliance? So that determines what a credit is. The way we determine the cost for the credit is what is the life cycle project cost for the BMP that's developing those 100 credits, whatever the credit is. So you're acquiring land rights. We'll sometimes, just to give some real examples, if we're developing a $3 million wetland stream restoration project for a mitigation bank or MS4 or some other funding source, we might spend $100,000 in time, labor, and effort citing, talking to landowners, acquiring land rights, paying a landowner 5, 10, 15, $20,000 per acre. So acquiring land, the siting process is a piece of that, that project cost. Obviously, getting all the entitlement, due diligence, teeny species reviews, all the permits required to build the restoration project as part of the overall project life cycle cost, the construction cost of the project, the maintenance and monitoring cost of the project. We oftentimes have endowment funding to cover perpetual stewardship cost of a project to protect that easement forever. Those financial assurances or endowment fundings part of the life cycle project cost. So that if the life cycle project cost with all of those components is $3 million, and it's generating 100 units of measurement or credits, that unit credit cost is the cumulative life cycle project cost divided by the number of widgets generated. And there is ideally some profit in there too, because we need to make money as a company. But there is always market pricing that is, you know, putting a ceiling on what a company like ours can charge in the marketplace. So I like using the example of the PennDOT case studies, because that was publicly procured. So there was competitive bidding. They built in some of the standard expectations with public funding, like prevailing wage. Some of our publicly procured offset projects include MBE, DBE participation in the funding, because it's tied to federal funding. So the funder can really drive what they want to buy through progressive procurement and build their requirements into the procurement package.
All right. And so just to put the top on this, the cost for these nature-based per unit credit or whatever it is significantly less than the standard BMP process. Is that
That is what the
that's the
numbers are.
takeaway?
What the municipal
Yeah.
engineering firms, that table that I shared showing the $106 per pound of sediment reduction, that came from the engineering firm that put that estimate together with their municipal customer. So I would say it's pretty well established at this point in time that the nature-based solutions are significantly more cost effective than the traditional gray infrastructure, basin retrofits, smaller scale bioswales, rain gardens. And that is the scale of the reductions from the larger nature-based projects, as well as the reduced maintenance and replacement costs, because gray infrastructure has a 10, 20, 30, 40-year long life cycle to it. So you pay for it once if you do a nature-based approach.
All right. Well, John, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate your time today, and uh, people who have attended today's webinar. I greatly appreciate your time and your interest in this. Just to top it off, we will be actually, I think the presentations were already sent out. The recording will be available on our YouTube channel, and we'll send out a link in a few days to that to all the participants. We do run a series of Technical Fridays. So today was the benefits restoration. We have a tentative one scheduled for myths and misconceptions of stormwater design, kind of the mistakes people see in reviewing and commenting on stormwater designs, art of commenting. So when regulations or permits are proposed, what's the best way to get your voice heard at the agencies? And then in November, the echoes of Sackett. You know, the federal laws changed with Sackett versus EPA, what a water of the United States is, and bring that back to see how that affect in New Jersey. And then in November, harmful algal blooms. So with that, again, greatly appreciated. John, I appreciate your time. I know we went a bit over, but I think this was a phenomenally successful and interesting topic. And I hope that municipalities and their professionals take it back and start to think about this as they develop their watershed assessment reports. Everyone, have a great afternoon, and thank you again.
See y'all.
Bye. All right.